Hello, I'm Rachel Babin from the Oncology Network, proud producers of the Oncology podcast. How has cancer care in the Ukraine been affected by the war? What are the greatest challenges facing oncologists in the Ukraine at the moment? How many patients are continuing to receive treatments during the Russian invasion? Are healthcare professionals hopeful for the future? And what about COVID-19? Today we welcome Dr. Andriy Hrinkiv, who helps us explore these questions. Andriy is a surgical oncologist at the Lviv Regional Cancer Center of Ukraine. He is also a member of the ASCO Central and Eastern European Regional Council. In today's update, Andriy discusses the current situation with Hans Brennan from the Oncology Journal Club podcast. Please share this episode with your friends and colleagues. You'll find links to the bios and Twitter handles in the notes on our website. For regular news and podcast updates, we invite healthcare professionals to join us at oncologynetwork.com.au. It's free and it's a great way to support the OJC. This is Rachel Babin, and this is the Oncology Podcast.
I'm very pleased to welcome here with me Dr. Andriy Hrinkiv. I hope I pronounce it a bit well, his name. He's a surgical oncologist from Ukraine. He's based in Lviv, who you want to pronounce it again. And I'm very pleased that we can discuss here about the situation in Ukraine and also how they manage now taking care of patients, especially in the field of oncology. So welcome, Andriy.
Good day, Professor Brennan. Thank you for the invitation, and it's an honor for me to be here. I would like to provide some information to shed some light on the situation in Ukraine and in West region overall in terms of oncology. So, from the beginning of the war, more than 6 million people fled the country. Another 7.5 million became internally displaced. Concerning the medical situation in the Western region, currently the situation is stable because the number of patients coming to the Western hospitals has finally stabilized and the size of queues has also slightly decreased. Since the beginning of the war, in my current workplace, Lviv Regional Cancer Center, which is the largest oncological centers in Western Ukraine, we have performed more than 1,500 consultations for internally displaced persons, among whom 420 received or are receiving chemotherapy and 169 were hospitalized for surgical intervention. We were able to manage such an overwhelming number of patients by providing some optimizations, extending working hours, providing lighter chemotherapy regimens in non-profile departments, and even using the currently a bit outdated cobalt radiation units. At first, when the war began, we struggled due to the total unpredictability of the situation. All scheduled oncological operations were stopped across the country, with only urgent being performed due to the threat of attacks and the possibility of a large number of injured coming. But the most acute problem was the total lack of medications, especially for chemotherapy. Because we didn't receive medication for the following year, logistics got complicated, many warehouses with medicines were destroyed, and our own reserves were almost exhausted due to the increasing flow of patients. Luckily, because of collaboration between pharma company and the Ministry of Health of Ukraine, we were able to receive almost everything needed for at least first lines of chemotherapy. I'm not talking about some precision medicine drugs, but at least some basic medications, also in small quantities.
And were you still suffering from the COVID crisis, or was COVID not an issue anymore at that time in Ukraine?
Currently, due to the situation, COVID is not an issue for us. We don't have a lot of COVID patients, and our hospitals currently are thinking only about injured people, about rehabilitation of soldiers, and psychological rehabilitation of people who suffered of these attacks. And they have a lot of work, and COVID currently on the second plane. But I suppose this issue will come on the first plane sometime again, because all the scouts on the border, all the scouts in hospitals, and we are expecting this.
Maybe a general issue, let's say before the war, did you have access to all new drugs? Or how was the situation? Because I remember from some countries in the neighborhood that I visited that sometimes they didn't have access to targeted agents or whatever. Or how is it in Ukraine in general?
Ukraine was just in the beginning of medical reformation, so we were just about receiving medication for the following year. And we didn't receive it because the war began before it. We always had basic medications, almost always, yes. We had some problems with target medications and immune therapy, some precision medicine drugs. Regarding target therapy, we had two drugs, only two medications. First one was trastuzumab for breast cancer and some gastrointestinal tumors in different situations. And we had sunitinib and imatinib. It can be used for gastrointestinal tumors, renal cancer, renal cell carcinoma, and some other cancers. But definitely not a lot of this in free access in Ukraine, and mostly only wealthy patients were able to buy such a stuff.
Okay, so there's no kind of funding system from the government that everybody can have access to all the new, let's say, expensive drugs.
No. All new drugs aren't affordable in Ukraine, and they're pretty expensive. Currently, there is some sort of discount or some sort of giveaway because pharma companies allowed for patients who bought the first cycles of this medication to receive following cycles for free. For example, if patient receives pembrolizumab, he will receive all the next pembrolizumab cycles for free, but it's just during the war period.
And how do you expect it will evolve? Let's hope that the war ends soon. I think financially you have to rebuild the whole country. So what in medicine do people worry about it, that it will be unaffordable to treat patients in the future?
We hope it will be affordable, but in Ukraine, average salary is to raise enough funds for insurance or medical insurance, and it's very hard to organize such an expensive drug for our patient. But it's improving, and trastuzumab and sunitinib, imatinib were just first steps. So basically, the situation became much better. We are expecting also pembrolizumab, which will totally change everything, and it will be our breakthrough in Ukraine regarding melanoma because we have no treatment for this.
And if we speak in your field, let's say surgery, is there any type of surgery you can perform, or do you say, okay, some types of surgery, we're not able to do that?
No, in Ukraine, surgeons is pretty qualified. We have a lot of surgeons who spent some time abroad, who were learning from the best, and we are able to provide really many surgical operations. For example, even in my center, a laparoscopic pancreatoduodenal resection is being performed, and it's really complicated operation. Also, in thoracic surgery department, we are performing bronchoplasty operations, so thoracoscopic operations, video-assisted operations. So regarding surgery, we can perform everything, almost everything, according to the best. And in my department, it's reconstructive surgery department. We have even some experience with performing head and neck surgeries with free flaps. So, for example, oral surgery with free flaps and vascular anastomosis, and it's really complicated operation.
And is there no risk for, let's say, some kind of brain drain? Because that's what we see in a lot of countries. So it was often the case also in other countries, also like Italy or other, where it was some kind of crisis. And then you saw that, that doctors didn't earn enough anymore. A lot of them went abroad. I can imagine now, especially with the war, that some doctors will say, okay, let's go to another country where I can become a surgeon or whatever. Is there a risk there, or is it people tend to stay in Ukraine?
I think mostly people tend to stay in Ukraine because the situation currently a bit improved. There are a lot of private clinics which allows you to get decent salary. There are also some clinical trials being performed in Ukraine, and Ukraine is among the European leaders in the number of patients in clinical trials. So we have all the possibilities for our doctors to earn even here.
Mm-hmm. And can you still include in clinical trials now? Because when we had the COVID crisis, I remember that a lot of countries, they stopped including in clinical trials. So I can imagine if you have a war situation, that it's even worse.
I'm personally involved in clinical trials, and I can say about Dnipro and Kyiv centers, but for example, in Lviv, we are not including new patients, and part of patients even decided to move abroad and continue their treatment there because pharma companies allowed them to move there, and we passed their materials regarding their treatment there.
And how is your family reacting to the situation? Do they feel safe enough now? Let's say you're in the west of Ukraine, I guess. Huh?
I'm living at west of Ukraine in Lviv, and this place seems to be relatively safe. And I can say that other place is much safer than this. So, for example, in my opinion, the chance of being killed by a rocket, which occasionally falls on Lviv, is the same as being hit by a car.
So you try to live with the situation, let's say.
Yes, we stayed here, and we will stay here till the end because I have work here, I have patients here, and the best thing for people during the war is to be in some sort of activity, to work hard, because it clears your mind and allows you for some fresh thinking.
So, Andre, maybe a question that some people wonder. So, let's say as a country you're in war, do people still get paid, or how does the financial system work in a country which is in war?
Financial system works fine and everyone gets paid. And even people who lost their job on the east of Ukraine or left Kiev, they also found a job here and they're working here. So doctors from Kiev region were assisting us where the Kiev was shelled and suburbs of Kiev were shelled. So we are receiving a lot of help, and our government actually they are doing all they can. We are receiving salary just in time.
So you still keep on paying taxes as well, I suppose.
Yes, we are keeping paying taxes, and they are encouraging us to work as usually, especially on the West, because it provides our economy with taxes and with some money to provide financial support for our army. They just a bit increased number of taxes, of course, because army tax, and it's very important.
Can you maybe give me some numbers from your cancer institute? How many patients there are treated in general?
In general, I can provide information regarding Lviv Cancer Center and the National Cancer Institute in Kiev. In Lviv Regional Cancer Center, we are performing about 30 surgical operations per day. It's approximately 30 to 40% of our capacity before the war, surgical volumes. We are providing chemotherapy to 120 to 140 patients and radiation therapy to 180 to 200 patients daily. Approximately 40% of these patients are internally displaced people. And as I said before, we also provided some optimization to maintain the things go right. And regarding the National Cancer Institute, they're performing 16 to 20 surgical operations per day. Radiation therapy department was expected to start today. And chemotherapy department is providing treatment to 120 patients, and it's provided with medications for approximately 2 months, just as us. There are some issues which need to be solved. As I said before, first issue is medication, and the second issue is with informational support, because there are a lot of patients who left their houses without any medical documentation because they were going in a hurry. And in Ukraine, it's less relevant, the same in Poland, because they have a lot of healthcare professionals speaking Ukrainian. But it's a serious issue for other countries, our neighbors, because language barrier is pretty serious. And it's very difficult to translate some medical documentation from Ukraine, and especially some handwritten documentation from some smaller hospitals. So there is issue with this. Also, there is problem with communication between healthcare physicians in Ukraine, abroad, and patients, because not a lot of patients have maintain their contacts with Ukrainian doctors, and there is a tendency in Ukraine that a lot of patients, after finishing surgical operation and radiation therapy, for example, they just quit and decide not to do follow-up, and they just disappear. So this problem is pretty common in Ukraine.
So if we need a translator, we just call you.
Okay, great. Yeah. I forgot to mention that we organize some translation assistance using our medical students. We have some medical students who know languages, and they were providing some translation for Melanoma Coalition, particularly Bettina Real, and some other organizations.
Maybe a final question. Do you see any ways that, let's say, people not living in Ukraine can help to support the situation there, or maybe even after the war, to rebuild the medical system? Or do you have any opinion on that?
Personally, I want to express gratitude for all the help we are receiving from doctors abroad, from healthcare professionals, because even I personally sent quite a few people abroad, some in Italy, some to Poland, and I received only the best feedbacks, the warmest thanks for this, and overall attitude for their treatment, which was the best possible in such a situation. And I think the best way to help us is just to help our patients abroad and maybe somehow influence pharma companies to provide some medications to Ukraine, because we still lack of medications. And providing medication to Ukraine, it solves not only our issue with medications, but it also solves another issue, because a lot of people want to stay in Ukraine. They want to be treated here. And it will decrease a lot on economy of our neighboring countries, because when our people travel abroad, when they are fleeing the country, they need not only treatment, they're using healthcare physician, translators, translator resources, they need shelter, they need food, they need a job. So in my opinion, it's much easier to provide Ukraine with medication and to allow this patient stay here on the West because it's safe.
Yeah, I fully agree with that because we also have a lot in Belgium, as you know, and some also need medical treatment, and we provide medical treatment, but most people always are willing, which is logic, to return to their country to get their treatment in Ukraine. Okay, with this last question, I would like to thank you really a lot to be able to have this interview with us and to share also your insights in the situation. And let's all hope, especially also for the people that live in Ukraine and also for the patients, of course, that situation will improve fast and that everything can be solved in a peaceful way. Thank you very much, Andrei.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Oncology Podcast. If you enjoyed today's edition and would like to subscribe, head over to our website, oncologynews.com.au, and sign up to our newsletter. Thanks for listening.